but I'm writing an article on the limits of shamelessness, right? What worked so well for Donald Trump isn't really working out too good for his supporters. You know, we live in an age where people that you would think that Roseanne Barr was perfectly suited for, because most people think this is a post-political correct era and think that there are no limits to shamelessness, think that they literally can get away with saying anything and everything. And Roseanne found out the hard way that that's not exactly the case. See, Donald Trump is unique in his shamelessness. Donald Trump has structural advantages that Roseanne doesn't have. Donald Trump is wealthy enough to be independent of what NBC did, whether they canceled his show or not. He didn't care. Roseanne literally just destroyed the lives of her entire staff with her bigotry. Now, we can talk about, there's so many levels of this, right, that we could talk about, like her long-standing bigotry, her long record of being just an all-around nasty individual. Again, I'm trying my best not to use profanity to describe her. That might become more and more difficult. I mean, I really want to know when that threshold was crossed, or what about this last incident made it a little too much for ABC. I mean, for me, like, okay, full transparency, I loved Roseanne, the show, in the late 80s, early 90s when it first came out. I don't even know. I was young, right? So I had a whole sense of nostalgia around it when it came out, and I really wanted to watch the show. I watched the first show as a critic. For those listening to the podcast, I did air quotes. I watched it as a critic so I could discuss it. Then I found myself laughing so hard that I watched the next episode, and then I saw the pictures of her with the Nazi outfit with cookies in the oven, dressed as Hitler. And I was like, okay, regardless of nostalgia, of anything else, I absolutely cannot watch this show. So that was a threshold for me. I mean, I knew she was an ass. There it is. Sorry, I was going to try. I knew she was an ass all this time. But for me, it was like, are you kidding me? How is she even accepted into the public sphere with this picture? That picture was enough for me. It wasn't enough for ABC. Of course, everyone's going to say, oh, it's comedy, Ben. It's dark humor. Okay, yeah. Let's see how well that works out for you in the long run. And I think that's the crux, not that I think, I know, rather, that is the crux of my article, is that you really think that this is a post-politically correct society where now, because Donald Trump has ascended to the White House, you can get away with anything and be successful in the public sphere. And the reality of it is that you do not have the structural advantages that Donald Trump has. Donald Trump has a level of narcissism and megalomania that makes him completely separated, and he's completely divorced from any feelings or concerns about people around him. And why that is important is that because part of shame is being hurt that you hurt other people. Or more specifically, you are embarrassed because your inner circle is looking at you with condemnation. That's a part of guilt. That's a part of shame. Donald Trump doesn't feel that. Donald Trump doesn't feel that, one, because he's a narcissist, but two, he has enough money so that the people around him are purchased. They're just yes men, yes women. There's nobody around him who's going to actually work to make him feel contrite. They're really just going to confirm that he is as great as he always thinks he is. I slipped into a Michael Brooks interpretation of Donald Trump, impersonation rather. So he has no one around him who's going to actually make him or foster the feelings of guilt or shame or contriteness. So he's perfectly insulated internally with his narcissism, and he's perfectly insulated externally because he surrounded himself with yes men and do boys and yes women who are not concerned whatsoever with correcting him. They just really want access to his wealth. And then he lucked up and was the perfectly politically incorrect individual at the height, right? There's a pendulum swing, and we're at the height of that curve where everyone was like, even liberals, this is the part of liberals' fault and progressives' fault, definitely progressives, because they buy into this too, the idea that political correctness has gone too far. And because it was something that liberals, even liberals and progressives, bought into, it validated, it doubled down, it gave so much credence and validity to what the far right was peddling as a fundraising mechanism and a political power mechanism. The attack on social justice, the attack on political correctness was nothing but a fundraising campaign for people like Jordan Peterson. And Donald Trump was the perfect individual who was incapable of feeling shame at the perfect time, at the height of the pendulum swing, right? At the height of the curve, when everyone was like, okay, guys, we got to slow down with this political correctness. It's okay for people on the right to make these racist jokes because it's not really racist. It's racially charged. And so Donald Trump was the perfect individual at the perfect time to capitalize on it all the way to the White House. And his supporters are really taking this to mean that they can get away with stuff now that they really cannot get away with. And this is why Roseanne Barr, and this is why people are so taken aback by the fact that Roseanne is losing her show now. Now, I still personally don't know when that threshold, just maybe it wasn't Roseanne by herself, right? It wasn't Roseanne in isolation, but it was a collective sigh from the American body politic to say enough. And I think Roseanne is so important for the culture wars because we are now going to see, hell, Sean Hannity condemned her. Tammy Lorenza condemned her. Bill O'Reilly said that she's an example of how white racism is still a problem in the United States of America. I mean, crap, people. This is a swing back in the pendulum. So it wasn't Roseanne in isolation. It wasn't like, okay, she went one step too far. What it was that the collective social conscious, the collective consciousness of the United States of America finally awakened and said, no. And because of that, she lost her job. And now people on the right who thought this was a free-for-all, they thought that this was an opportunity for them to say whatever they wanted to say. Somebody, I retweeted it and I can't remember who the individual was, but this is what he said. He said that if you use anti-political correctness as your sword, you cannot use political correctness as your shield. And what he's saying there is so true. It represents the asymmetrical fight that I mentioned at the top of the show, right? It represents the fact that they are willing to deride everything that we believe in and fight in as political correctness. But if we turn and do to them the exact same thing that they do to us, but we do it for justice and we do it for equality, then they will cry that they are being attacked, right? They won't call it political correctness. They'll just say that they're a victim, right? That's exactly what we're up against. And so we're in a place where now that faction, they really can't get their bearings. The equilibrium point is shifting. The pendulum is swinging back. It's not going to swing back quickly. This is just one data point in a long process back to where we can realize that being politically correct is not a disease. There's nothing wrong with actually being kind and being circumspect in the words that you choose to say and the things that you choose to do, particularly as they affect other people's lives. For the longest time, we have acted as though that was a problem. Like that was the real crime. The real crime wasn't the fact that Jordan Peterson wants to attack people, transgender people, and call them outside of their gender identification. No, that's not the real problem. The real problem is that transgender people and LGBTQ advocates have the nerve to say that, you know, hey, call them by the pronoun that they want to be called by. That's the real problem. Not the fact that there's an entire faction of people with political power and economic power that have the ability to make a tremendous amount of money off of a game to them that is real life to other people. Right? The game to them is monetizing, as Jordan Peterson said, monetizing social justice warriors, monetizing this, taking it, you know, that's the game. It's a game, a money-making game to them versus the lives of other people. We've drawn an equivalence. Perfect example. Ben Shapiro, along with the guy from reason.org, they're making the argument that Roseanne being put off the air is an example of her free speech. Yes. And it's also an example of corporations doing what they have the right to do. And so it is what it is. No real free speech violation there. And then they draw the equivalence between that and the NFL, saying so too is the NFL players taking a knee and this private corporation penalizing them. So it's a wash. Everybody happy, everybody loses. The problem is when you draw that equivalence, you are being extremely disingenuous, because on the one hand, you have someone who is engaging in hate speech and bigotry being penalized for her bigotry, compared to people who are fighting against bigotry being penalized for fighting against bigotry. Now, if all that matters to you is the bottom line is free speech and that's it, like we all should be able to say what you want to say, then that's fine. But what good are you really? What good are you to society? You're not really good to society because you're perfectly happy empowering people like Richard Spencer and Nazis to grow their cancerous ideology through the argument of free speech absolutism, only to have them turn around later on and do away with free speech to destroy our society as we know it. This is literally their plan. I'm not being hyperbolic. There are those on the left, left-leaning libertarian types, free speech absolutists, whose answer to the intolerance paradox is to be tolerant of all speech, including intolerant speech. Karl Popper, 1945, we discussed this on the show so many times. The reality of it is that there are always going to be people who will use our tolerance against us. And so for those on the left who resolve that to say that, oh, if we're intolerant of intolerance, then we become intolerant ourselves, they haven't resolved it. They either haven't read or they don't care, or they dismiss the argument from Karl Popper, who says that we as a tool to protect a tolerant society, we must defend the right. We must be intolerant to a level of intolerance. We must defend the right to be intolerant to intolerance. Actually, I use his words exactly. He said, unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and tolerance with them. And then he concluded by saying we should therefore claim in the name of tolerance the right not to tolerate the intolerant. People on the left-leaning libertarians and free speech absolutists on the left, they either dismiss that argument, don't know that argument, or don't care. People on the right like Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin, they've weaponized this, right? They've weaponized this idea that you must be tolerant of all speech because it's convenient for their ideology, number one, right? Because I'll stop there. It's convenient for their ideology. Number one. Two, it's actually convenient for their pocketbooks. It's monetizable. It gives them the appearance as though they are the more reasonable ones, that they are the logical ones. In reality, they are propping up on their side of the equation. They are the ones propping up Nazis, because the Nazis are on their side of the equation. The Richard Spencers of the world are on their side of the equation. They may not be the same, but they are in the same realm. They're both on the right. They're all on the right side of the political spectrum. So it's both monetarily profitable for them as well as it is. And the reason I'm bringing this up in terms of Roseanne Barr is because we as a collective society have a right to say what we are going to tolerate and what we will not tolerate. We may not have the right to do it through the force of law, but we damn sure have the ability to do it through societal norms, and to say that we as a collective society do not believe that we should be rewarding an individual who is on every single chance that she gets an opportunity displaying the most bigoted bile imaginable. So the entire framework around this, the entire argument around this, defending Roseanne Barr, or you know, kind of equivocating and saying that what she did and what she suffered is the same as what NFL players did and what they suffered. Equivocating there is extremely disingenuous and uninformed for leftists who support that idea, but also disingenuous and in the form of grifting by people on the right, like Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin. And then you have those on the further right who have no shame in their hypocrisy because they only value the opinion of people on the right. They only value the opinion of conservatives. You have those who are literally justifying, who are supporting Roseanne Barr and still attacking NFL players. I think Sam Harris is in the Ben Rubin group as well. Ben Rubin, well, they're practically the same people. So you have those who want to appear logical and reasonable, whose way out has been to say, oh, it's, you know, it's free speech. All of them had their free speech and all of them were penalized. And so it's a wash. Well, no, we as a collective society say that we do not have to tolerate bigoted and intolerant speech. We do not have to sit by and allow this type of speech to be lifted into a financially rewarding situation. You don't get, and this is fundamentally what Donald Trump got to do. Donald Trump was separate from the concerns of consumer boycotts. He was separate from, he made enough money to not be concerned about what his network did. And he was perfectly insulated from shame within because of his narcissism. He's perfectly insulated from shame without because he has nobody around him who could lead him to a contrite spirit. Contrite spirit. My religion really came out right there, right? But to a level of contriteness, right? But no one else has that. The rest of us are really dependent on the opinions of the public opinion of us. And if the public opinion of us is that we're a bigoted piece of scum, then we are not going to reap the benefits of the public. Donald Trump didn't have to worry about that because he made enough money in real estate to not be concerned about whether or not he lost his job. Roseanne Barr had to be concerned about whether or not she lost her job, not only for herself, but because she probably somewhere deep down actually does care about John Goodman and Sarah, I forgot her last name, the rest of them. So she is probably feeling a tremendous amount of guilt internally right now, but she's also going to be on Joe Rogan tomorrow. So I'm pretty sure she's going to blame all the social justice warriors. So it only lasted for a minute, but it's not working out well for her. That's the point. I went all the way around there, all the way around all these different points to say this. If you think that we're in an age of a post-politically correct society where now you could say anything that you want to do, that you could show up in Charlottesville without your Klansmanhood and not suffer the ramifications of the public knowing about your bigotry, if you think that we are so far gone from a politically correct society that you can get away with and say anything that you want to say, try it and see that what worked out so well for Donald Trump ain't really going to work out too well for you.